talk about Medicare-for-all again, shall we? I know, so exciting. Everybody's like, ooh, well, I just want to talk about Medicare-for-all. It's not going to, only the rich are going to pay for it. I'm going to make sure that everybody out there, well, first I'm going to get me a beer. And then just the rich people, the millionaires and the billionaires, are going to pay for it. Because, darn it, this is the U.S. of A., and if the commies are going to take over, they better look like and sound like librarians. So, yeah, Elizabeth Warren wants us to have a whole bunch of free health care coming our way via Medicare for All, which will not be free at all, as you know. It's a terrible misnomer. The problem she has run into recently, however, is, as we've been talking here on the show, what is the cost? What is the cost going to be of this whole thing? And that's something that you would think, if you were looking to be at the very front line of shifting responsibility for 1/6 of the American economy straight up into the government checkbook, right? The government's just going to be paying for healthcare for everyone and eliminating 150 million plus people's insurance plans. That's a big move. That's a big step. You'd think you've done the homework ahead of time. But it turns out Elizabeth Warren hasn't done all the addition, hasn't crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. Here she is on the issue of the cost of this plan. Blake LeBay, please, sir.
But is it fiscally responsible to release a plan before you figured out how you're going to
I
pay
think
for
there
it?
have been many estimates about what the cost would be and many different payment streams. And I've been working on how to give the exact details to make that work. I've been a co-sponsor of Medicare for All from the beginning. You know, one of the things that happens when you do lots of selfie lines is you get to hear from a lot of different people. And what they talk about is how the cost of health care is crushing their families. They talk about how they have gold-plated insurance, and yet the out-of-pockets add up to tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. The American family just can't stand this any longer. They cannot bear the costs. People are still filing for bankruptcy because of health care problems. Health care is a basic human right, and we need to fight for basic human rights.
Healthcare is a basic human right. That's an interesting position to take, isn't it? Because how do we then make that a reality? What do we do with that? So when I want to see a neurologist, let's say, do I get to see the doctor that everybody knows is excellent, or do I just see whatever doctor the government tells me to see? Do I get to see a doctor quickly, or do I have to wait 6 months to see a doctor? Unfortunately, the government in the provision of services is really, really bad. And healthcare is an incredibly complicated sector of the economy to begin with. But to say that it's a human right, okay, well, very basic healthcare may be a human right in that you could afford to pay for the most baseline level of actual care. But who determines what happens to the very scarce commodity of world-class doctors? What happens when you want to go to, MD Anderson, I think it is, or you're going to go to the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic or one of these places? Does the government just pay for all of that? And if the government's going to pay for all of that, how expensive is it really going to be? Because does everyone get to have the most expensive doctors in the world? You start to look at the system as it is. And first of all, what she was saying there about how, people have tens of thousands of out-of-pocket and hundreds of thousands going bankrupt. Yeah, bad things happen to people all the time. That's true. If we had a real health insurance market and not increasingly socialized medicine, then insurance would be able to actually cover catastrophic healthcare issues and not be constantly trying to subsidize and cross-subsidize run-of-the-mill day-to-day healthcare issues. Right? People need to understand that $10,000 plus of healthcare costs, if you ran into that realm where all of a sudden your healthcare costs get really big, insurance could kick in and start paying for these things. But we also have insurance that people expect to pay for a visit to a primary care doctor, and they want to pay a $10 or $20 copay. All right, well, the money has to come from somewhere. We all think that there's this magic money god that just makes all this stuff appear for us because the government tells us that's the case, but it doesn't work that way. And the long-term pressures on the dollar, I mean, everyone's just, we've gotten so used now to I think we're at 23 trillion in debt now. Before long, we're going to be 30 trillion in debt. At some point, we're going to lose reserve currency status. We're going to have big problems. I don't know what the point is. No one really knows what it is. The problem with waiting until you get there is that once you're there, it's too late. And then you have really big economic issues. But the Warrens and the Ocasio-Cortezes and the far left, the Democratic Party right now, they will just advocate for more spending as long as they like the spending at any level. If they can justify it politically, then mathematically they will just ignore the numbers and say that we'll figure it out. This has become a very common phrase in the left. Well, how can we do this thing? How will we pay for it? Well, we'll figure it out. Look at Elizabeth Warren right now. How much does it cost? A lot of different costs and estimates. Who knows? But she wants you to know that she's been working on this for a very long time. Would you play clip 9, please?
Why didn't your Medicare-for-all payment structure plan, why didn't that plan come out earlier in the cycle? Because this question has been lingering for a very long time.
I've been working on this for a very long time.
Senator, shouldn't you have decided how you're going to pay for the plan before you released your health
I've
plan?
been working on the details for a long time. I've been a co-sponsor of Medicare-for-all since it came out 2 years ago. Is that right? I'm trying to remember the exact time when it came out, 2017. Since it came out 2 years ago, I was the original co-sponsor, as were several other people at the time.
You see, they started with the "is this popular" idea. The free stuff. Let's start with this. Hey, we're going to give you this kind of free stuff. Is it popular? That was when they said the co-sponsor of the bill. And now it gets into, well, what does it really mean? And turns out they didn't think that much about it. They just like the idea. Why? Because they think it's fair, because she says healthcare is a human right. But the market functions the way that the market functions regardless of whatever Elizabeth Warren says. How are you going to have the doctors, the facilities, the medical care? Who is going to incentivize new drugs, better procedures, cleaner, safer hospitals, all these things that we want for the healthcare system? More access to doctors. It's crazy sometimes. You know what you want. You have to wait to see a doctor. You should be able to just see a nurse practitioner somewhere who can write the script, and this should be very easy, and insured shouldn't have to be involved at all. There's a lot of things out there that could be changed in the healthcare system, but Elizabeth Warren just wants to make this it's a moral crusade. And it's a moral crusade that, by the way, with it comes an enormous expansion of the government and decisions that will be made by the government that will affect your life in very important and profound ways. So you would like to think that she's thought about this more and she's thought about this beforehand, but it turns out that that's not really the case. But Democrats are often short on details. So this was a fun moment as these things go. You had hold on. Amy Klobuchar. I don't want to skip past this for a second, because Amy Klobuchar, we're looking at a Democrat field where there's a lot of jockeying for a position right now. A lot of people going back and forth over who's going to be the nominee and who's going to be perhaps a VP slot. And Amy Klobuchar has distinguished herself as a candidate for the Democrats right now who is not operating in a total fantasy land. I mean, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are fantasy land candidates. What they're talking about is just not going to happen. It's not going to work. It's a bad idea. Klobuchar takes the approach of, well, no, let's actually try to work within the art of the somewhat plausible. I'm not even sure it's plausible, but the somewhat plausible. And here's what she says about it. And there's no way to get around this for Warren and others. Play clip 15, please.
I've made very clear how I'm going to pay for everything that I've put out there. I think that's important because we've got a president that's added trillions of dollars to the debt on the shoulders of our kids, and I think we need to make the case. And as I said at the debate stage, I just think I have a better way, a way that will insure more people and bring premiums down, and that's with the non-profit public option. And it doesn't trash Obamacare, it builds on Obamacare, and I think you have to show how you're going to pay for things. And that was the point. And I don't think any one person on that stage has a monopoly on good ideas.
You never hear from Democrats? Again, just apply the lens of objectivity to this as much as possible. This is not a partisan thing. This is a true thing. When do you hear about the failures of Obamacare from them? Why are we even talking about Medicare for all? We just went through this huge debate and all this tumult over Obamacare, right? Multiple trips to the Supreme Court, all these court battles, all this stuff. And the Supreme Court changed the meaning of plain language. Thank you, John Roberts, in order to keep this bill, this law, Obamacare Alive, the Affordable Care Act, how did it fail? If we're going to build on it, shouldn't we know why it needs to be built upon? Where are the shortcomings? Where did it not work? Now, a lot of people would start to jump out of their seats now and say the shortcomings, there's tremendous shortcomings, right? It's the healthcare plans that it got rid of, people wanted to keep. It allowed the government a massive expansion of the mandates that HHS and other government agencies can have that affect your healthcare. It didn't ensure that many more people with real insurance. It just gave them Medicaid. It was really a massive Medicaid expansion with some influence over the individual market. Well, why is Medicaid not great insurance, folks? There's perhaps a lesson here. Why is Medicaid not something that people have particularly good health outcomes from? Because Medicaid only pays for certain procedures and at certain reimbursement rates. A lot of doctors won't do it because they would have to close their practices if they took a lot of Medicaid because it just doesn't pay them enough. Why does it pay that amount? Because the government says that's what it will pay. Why doesn't the government just say Medicaid will pay for everything? Pay for any procedure at any doctor at whatever rate is the going rate for that procedure. Oh, we know why. Because it would be wildly expensive. And people that are recipients of Medicaid don't have the political clout on their own to just have the government writing huge checks. And by the way, if in fact Medicaid then did have that level of coverage, I'm trying to really work through the different levels of it. If Medicaid did have effectively a blank check from the government for whatever you need if you're on Medicaid, well, why wouldn't everyone want to be on Medicaid? And that's you're seeing how we've transitioned already to this Medicare-for-all thing. Because you can't make Medicaid is not very good health insurance. Obamacare expanded Medicaid all across the country, right? Medicaid doesn't pay enough money. There's not enough money in the system. And if you're going to transfer money from elsewhere in the system to Medicaid, people would notice because it would be trillions of dollars. So what are they doing now? They're going to say, well, we're going to give everybody the same insurance under Medicare-for-all. And the idea being that would then allow for you'd have a better version of Medicaid. Everybody have the better version of Medicaid. Because it's not even Medicare-for-all because you won't have copays. And you won't have all the cost sharing that Medicare, which you pay into over your life. So calling it Medicare-for-all is really a lie. It's just single payer. It's going to be Medicaid, but everyone's going to be on Medicaid, just a much more expensive version of it. If it were just as easy as saying just spend more money, well, then why not just make Medicaid the best program ever? Why not just funnel so much money into it that that's all anybody would want? Well, because then all of a sudden you'd have poor people getting better health care than people that are paying for their health care. And ultimately you have to ask, well, is that right? If you're on health care welfare, should you be getting better health care than people that are struggling, families that are working class families that are trying to pay their bills and that are trying to pay these high taxes to pay for the Medicaid? I mean, this is where you just get into, this is a fight over the redistribution of assets. And it's a question of whether people are entitled to make their own decisions and have private property and enjoy the fruit of their labors, or the government just makes all their determinations for them. But all this other stuff, they're just squeezing the balloon at different ends and thinking they're going to have a different outcome. Why did Obamacare fail? Why are we even having this conversation about this now? Because everything that we said about Obamacare originally was true. It was all true. And that it was a stepping stone to single payer is also true, because here we are talking about single payer.
President Trump, perhaps inspired by Goebbels and the propagandists of the Third Reich, seemed to employ this tactic that the bigger the lie, the more obscene the injustice, the more dizzying the pace of this bizarre behavior, the less likely we are to be able to do something about it.
Did I hear you correctly say that perhaps he was influenced by Goebbels and the Third Reich in terms of telling a big lie? I just want to make sure that's what I heard you say.
That's right. There is so much that is resonant of the Third Reich in this administration, whether it is attempting to ban all people of one religion and saying that Muslims are somehow inherently dangerous or defective or disqualified. Outside of Nazi Germany, it's hard for me to find another modern democracy that had the audacity to say something like this. And then this idea from Goebbels and Hitler that the bigger the lie and the more often you repeat it, the more likely people are to believe it. That is Donald Trump to a T.
I can't take stupid Beto anymore. Anybody that was part of creating this mythology around Beto as a possible long shot candidate for the presidency should really be ashamed. I mean, they should feel the need to take many, many, many long showers to wash off the shame of this guy who is the worst Democrat running right now. Just says the most dishonest things, the most sanctimonious, and the least intellectually worthwhile of all these candidates. Has nothing to add to the conversation. He's just a Trump. He's just an avatar of Trump derangement hatred. That's it. Offers nothing else worthwhile from a policy perspective. Says the things that I would expect someone to say if they were just doing a focus group on how to get MSNBC and far left YouTube commentary watchers to feel like they had a candidate that was speaking for them. I also have to note that Al Sharpton there with Gurgle. I know Goebbels is kind of a hard name, but it's definitely not Gurgle. Regardless, calling the president, or I should say comparing the president specifically to the Nazi propaganda minister and just any comparisons to the Third Reich and to really double down on this. Look at how often Democrats do this stuff. They will still refer to, and I over the weekend went for a walk and try to get some sunshine, and there was a resist fascism rally going on in Union Square here in New York City. And I stopped by, I took a look at it for a little bit. And resist fascism, I mean, these people are just a collection of idiots. There's no fascism. There's no fascism to speak of. This isn't Trump saying something mean about some journalist you like is not fascism. Or saying that CNN is fake news is not fascism. It's an objective and true statement. So the people that are saying this stuff, Cornel West was there. I heard him, and they really like to compare the president to Nazism. And it's impossible to be an intellectually serious person in politics and treat people that compare this president to the Third Reich as intellectually serious. It's not possible to do that. You cannot be an honest person worthy of anyone listening to you if you really think that there's any similarity between this and a Nazi regime that started a war that killed 60 million people and murdered 6 million Jews and 11 million people in the death camps. It's not possible. It's an absurd and utterly absurd thing to say. But the Betos of the world will then turn around and say they want to restore decency and civility in politics. So, hey, you guys all voted for a Nazi, but can we all be nicer to each other now? Doesn't work that way, Beto.
If you are willing to love, if you are willing to fight for a government of compassion and justice and decency, if you are willing to stand up to Trump's desire to divide us up, if you are prepared to stand up to the greed and corruption of the corporate elite, if you and millions of others are prepared to do that, there is no doubt in my mind that not only will we win this election, but together we will transform this country.
If you are willing to pay 70% of your income in taxes, if you're willing to do the things that have never worked before, including the Soviet Union. Now, I'm sounding a little bit like Cuomo, actually. It's kind of Bernie. But when Bernie yells, he sounds a little like Cuomo. Are you willing to let people like me with no understanding of economics or mathematics make massive decisions about the future of the United States economy? I hope the answer is no. The notion of a compassionate government, by the way, government is a system. Government is not a human being. It does not hold you and wipe away your tears and tell you that everything's going to be okay. Government is not your friend. It's not a buddy. It's not someone that you go drinking with or have tea with at the end of a hard day. Government doesn't rub your feet or tell you that it loves you. Government doesn't snuggle up to you by the fire. I was really trying to keep going back between, is this a human or a dog I'm comparing this to? But government doesn't do those things. Libs, though, get a little confused, I think. And the far left Bernie Sandernista types believe that the government will turn into one big, when they do the fingers that kind of they wave in the air with the woo at the rallies. I forget what that's what they do at some of these left-wing rallies. They also like to do the mic check, and they've all this protest culture stuff. I saw some of it on Saturday at the Resist Fascism rally. But, Bernie Sanders, there is some truth in advertising here when he talks about transforming the country. We need to transform the country. Why? Because the millionaires and the billionaires are ruining it. Well, that's not really true, is it? The country's actually doing quite well. One of the for Democrats who run around talking about all the lies that Trump tells, there is a fundamental lie that is at the heart of the entire Democrat campaign right now. To unseat President Trump. Never mind the impeachment stuff and everything else. There's the lie that the country is doing poorly and things are going badly. The country's actually doing quite well. And I know that doesn't get headlines. It doesn't even necessarily get people to listen. I think some people get tense when they hear that. They become angry. They don't like the idea that things are going well. I've never forgotten when the author Michael Crichton said that he had tried this experiment many times. The guy wrote Jurassic Park, the show ER. I have a particular fondness for his body of work because he wrote books that got me to start reading books for fun when I was a kid. The first series of books that I read that I really, really thought were cool and exciting. Him and Tom Clancy, really. And the Lord of the Rings trilogy with Tolkien. And actually, Alexandre Dumas for the Three Musketeers. I remember read that one, too, very early on in my reading journeys. But he said that if you go to a cocktail party of people who think they're very sophisticated and you want to get their attention, you have to always start with a subject that has... you have to talk about looming catastrophe and how things are going badly, whatever it is. Oh, the market's going to crash soon. Oh, climate change is going to kill us all. Oh, Trump's going to start a war with North Korea. If you go into a cocktail party, you say, things are going really well in this area. Or, I'm not talking about personal, I'm talking about political stuff, right? You can say, my kid just graduated the 8th grade. Everyone go, yay. I mean, not that, obviously. But when you're talking about policy issues, the big questions of our day, if you want attention, be a catastrophist. And if you speak honestly about what's going well, be prepared for people to be hostile to that. Because we've all been so conditioned, especially by the media, to think in terms of what is most negative and to seek out the negative and believe the negative above even the contrary evidence that things are actually going pretty well. You will face hostility from people. This was the Crichton line. You'll face hostility from people for being honest about what how things are going well. I mean, recently I told somebody, isn't it amazing how much better food is today? And I thought this was a fascinating exchange because this friend of mine all of a sudden said, "What do you mean food's better today?" Well, we don't have the same connection to soil and organic and sustainable, and we look at other countries and their access to food that comes from the loving hands tending to the soil and all this kind of stuff. And I looked at this person, I was like, were you alive in the 80s? Because I was. I mean, in the 90s, and food's a lot better now. I mean, you walk around any city, any place in the country where there's a concentration of people, the stuff you can get in the grocery store now, just the varieties, the safety of the food, the cleanliness. I mean, this is just one example. But people don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe me. Oh, no, that's not true. I sit around and say, think about how much time and nonsense you save by having the technology that we have today. And they'll say, oh, but, look at all the time you waste on your cell phones all the time. Well, yeah, but that used to be, actually typing on a typewriter. Some of you probably remember that. Typing out letters, walking them down the hallway, putting them in the mail, putting them in remember those tubes, Producer Mark, in the buildings that have are they pneumatic tubes? Is that what you call them, right? With the air that sends the things?
Yeah, like a bank drive-through.
Yeah. Yeah, like you put it in
Yep,
like,
exactly.
Yeah. That was like state of the art for a while.
Now you just do that in an email.
I mean, I've never gotten to do that. I actually kind of want to find one just because that sounds like it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, they still have them at bank drive-thrus, and I think medical services use them too.
Yeah, now you do it with email though, which is not nearly as fun. Email can't, take your fingers off. So, at least not that I'm aware of. But I know I've got a little far afield here. But I like to just point out that I could start the show off every day like, oh my gosh, the country's going to hell. The currency's gonna collapse, the economy's on fire, the climate change. I just yell about things all the time. Oh, look, we're being betrayed, it's being destroyed. There's bad stuff going on. And stories that have conflict are inherently more important and more interesting, right? I mean, you don't need someone to talk about how everything is fine and there's nothing to talk about. But the Democrats, the reason I'm thinking about this, the Democrats have to conjure up, have to wholesale fabricate, really, a country that is in disarray, a country where we are overtaken by racism and hatred and dysfunction and fascism. And these are all myths. This is all mythology. I'm here in New York City. I mean, I ride the subway every day. And all I see on the subway are people like me working, doing their jobs, minding, there's some crazy stuff on the subway too, but 99% of people on the subway are minding their own business, doing their own jobs, working hard, trying to do their thing, fighting their own struggles. And we all sit next to each other, and we're actually usually packed in like sardines, often standing next to each other. And we're obeying laws, we're being more or less respectful to each other, and we're all kind of just doing our thing. And all I see are Americans around me who, when they interact, are decent, kind, and friendly to each other 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100. This storyline of the fascistic, Islamophobic, xenophobic, racist, anti-women, anti-LGBT America is just not true. I mean, yes, they would focus on the Republican Party and say they're the reason for it, but this constant downgrading of America to this dysfunctional place that people like Bernie Sanders, my friends, have to transform. They're going to transform the country. He's not just saying he's going to fix a few things here and there and be a good steward of what works in the government already. He's going to fundamentally transform it. I don't think he should do that. I don't think it's a good idea. And then you see, for example, the AOC version of events, and recognize that this is all utterly bereft of real strategy and thought, that the left-wing movement in this country is really just an emotional response. It's a conditioned emotional response. It's not people that really think about what's happening and understand how normal Americans interact with each other and what's really going on in the country all the time. It's all based in the narratives you hear on MSNBC and CNN and in the New York Times. Producer Mark, would you play clip 17 for me? Oh, I'm sorry. No. Play clip 4. That was what I was looking for. Play clip 4, please.
We need a United States that really, truly, and authentically is operated, owned, and decided by working and all people in the United States of America. That is
What does that even mean? We need a United States that really, truly, and authentically is operated, owned, and decided by all people in the United States of America. Totally for real. That is what we need. This is a rising star of the Democratic Party. I'm looking at this. What does that even mean? People are cheering, yeah, it's right. We need an America operated, owned, and decided by working people, but all people. Well, is it working people or is it all people? First of all, which one? And what does it mean to be operated, owned, and decided by? Does she have a better system in mind for this country than what we have? Does she know something the Founding Fathers didn't know about the system of government that they put in place? Who are the people that are clapping for this? I saw this on Saturday in Union Square Park here in New York, or in Union Square rather. Well, Union Square Park too. This is just all, it's a cultural movement. There are things you clap for. You clap for social justice. You don't think about what social justice really means. You just clap for social justice. You clap for anybody who says climate change is an existential threat. You clap for people who talk about the millionaires and the billionaires stealing all the money from us. Even though Bernie's a millionaire with 3 houses. You are conditioned as a leftist to think that anyone who talks about equality is a good person. Anyone who talks about merit or success or the rule of law is a bad person. Individual initiative, individual responsibility. No, that sounds anti-social justice. You can't be in favor of any of that. This is again why I think that there are so many people that now look at what's going on with the Democratic Party and they recognize that even with all of Trump's deficiencies, and the wall has not been built yet. There's a lot of nepotism in this White House. There's a lot of stuff going on that people would look at and say, that sometimes the tweets are really not helpful. saying what he said to the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, on that phone call. He could have said it better, and that would have gone a long way. But it's between Trump and the crazy people, folks. And that's really what you're facing here. Because even if it's a Biden, or it's not going to be Kamala Harris, but someone like that who seems more establishment ready, the beating heart of the Democratic Party now is effectively socialist. They're just trying to, the only differentiation is the speed of the socialist incrementalism. That's the only real difference that you see in the policies. Other than that, it's just a question of how fast do we get to, canceling college debt. By the way, if they're going to cancel college debt, can they cancel credit card debt? Because that would really make me happy. I'm just paying for food, man, and like important stuff that I need, dude. Why can't we just cancel my credit card debt? Why is it just student loans? I looked at student loans and I said, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to get a job instead. That was a decision that I made. Now you're going to tell me that they would just cancel. If I had just taken out a couple $100,000 of loans, I would have just paid. The government's just going to pay for it. This is crazy stuff, but it has resonance. People like to believe that their decisions were not their own to make, and that there's some government entity out there that is going to just be compassionate and kind and take care of them. The government will not take care of you. The government, as we see throughout history, is to be restrained because it is not your friend. It is there to guarantee rights and to establish very basic processes and functions that it is given power to do by the people, rooted in individual rights, private property, and human dignity. But that's it. It's not supposed to sit around and make you feel good all day long. The government is not a cheerleading section. The left doesn't seem to understand this, or rather, they reject that. They think that I'm the crazy one. Certainly heard plenty of that lately.
I'm just glad to see that the process is beginning to really do the investigation into Rudy Giuliani. He has clearly broken many laws. And, I was listening to the report and as you were playing it, and it also raises for me questions about, again, who knew what in the administration. As I've been thinking about it, clearly there are questions to be asked of the chief of staff. We've talked about Mick Mulvaney, but I frankly think that we should also be asking questions of John Kelly and Reince Priebus. Because clearly for a long time now we've been talking about bad behaviors coming from this administration and coming from the desk of the President of the United States.
Are there specific laws you believe Giuliani has broken or may have broken?
Well, I don't know. We're going to find out.
You see, I say things to you like Democrats just repeat these slogans, these accusations, these lines. And you might think, well, Buck, is that really true? Are they really doing that? I give you Exhibit A. Kamala Harris. Rudy Giuliani has clearly broken many laws. Anderson Cooper probably just, asking the most basic and straightforward question anybody could in the circumstances. Okay, like what? Well, we got to find out first, Kamala Harris says. That's not how it works. I know Kamala maybe had a fondness for locking people up back in the day, as we know, including parents of truant kids. Kamala, this is why people refer to her as Cop Kamala, which I think is unfair to cops because she was a prosecutor, not a cop. But when prosecutors, one of the more dangerous statist entities out there, you want prosecutors who believe in a very limited government and believe in justice over process. Well, actually, that can be dangerous, too, now that I think about it. You just want prosecutors that have good judgment. How about that? Kamala, though, doesn't know what laws Rudy has broken. She just knows he's broken a lot of laws. There's a lot of truth in this, though. This is really the way the Democrats approach everything. Trump is guilty of stuff, man, and so he has to be impeached. Well, what is he guilty of? Oh, so much. Okay, like what? Oh, my gosh, the Russia, Ukraine, and the emoluments, and okay, how? They never have answers. They don't know. Just like if I asked anybody at this Stop Fascism rally on Saturday, how is Trump a fascist? What has he done that is fascist? Saying things that you don't like about somebody is fascism? Saying things that offend certain protected groups is fascism? The left would say yes. That's well, if that's fascism, my friends, I'd like to know what we are seeing in some countries around the world where there are still concentration camps, like in North Korea and China. What do we call that? You know, what system do we have when there's real fascism or real totalitarianism or authoritarianism going on?